As we mentioned earlier, this is the second week of Advent, represented by the theme of peace. And so I ask you the question, how do you know peace? How do we actually know that? How do we experience that? We're going to touch on it a little bit as we move forth through today. So we'd like to recap, because we're doing a 2-week series here, going from 10 to 2 to 1. And ultimately what we're talking about is we're looking at the evolution of human consciousness collectively over the millennia, but we're also allowing that to speak to us metaphysically and seeing how our own individual soul, how our own consciousness is evolving. So when we go from 10 to 2 to 1, what I'm talking about is looking at the idea of the 10 Commandments as given through Moses. And then about 1,000 years later, we have Jesus come along. And he says, really, we're synthesizing this down to only 2. Love God, love people. And ultimately, when we look through the biblical text and we come to Revelation, what we're really finding at a metaphysical level is the idea of oneness. We're all just one, expressing differently. Oneness, not sameness. So last week, we took a look at the first 4 commandments, which were all about God. And we talked about this idea of in the midst of our current situation, in the midst of our current political polarization, religious polarization, philosophical polarization, we get consumed and we're bombarded by all this negativity with all these things that are happening around us. But we have the opportunity. We are at a crossroads, what we talked about last week. We are at a crossroads to make a decision. We can make a decision for compassion and love, showing up and expressing that way. Or we can make the decision and express to continue to push forward and split apart even more through this polarization, the human consciousness, which I believe will ultimately be the demise of the human race. But we have a choice. We are at that crossroads. Today, we're going to continue on that same thing. We're going to look at the next 6 of the commandments. And what I would like you to do when we get into them is to take a look at them in the similar light, in the similar way that we looked at them, and we'll review in a little bit. The same idea of this evolution. Moving from 10 training wheels, if you will. This is how you will live a good life and a better life if you do this, and don't do this. Ultimately comes along saying, wow, if I can really live this out in a perspective of knowing and loving God and knowing and loving people, I don't have to worry about what I do and I don't do, because it will all be there. I will express. And then ultimately, when we realize that we are one, you and I are created in the image and likeness of God, and we're expressing differently, then we have the opportunity to say namaste. The God in me, the Christ in me, beholds and sees and acknowledges and honors the God, the Christ within you. We have the opportunity to be there, but it's going to take a little bit of reflective work and meditation work on our own. So again, we're at this crossroads. We are at the crossroads. So I'm going to make another attempt at what failed last week. There's a man driving down the road, in a country road, and he's doing about 40 down this country road as a salesman, and he looks out his window and he sees a chicken running alongside of him at 40 miles an hour. And stops and he looks again, he goes, oh my goodness, there's really a chicken going 40 miles. So he speeds up to 60. The chicken's still with him. He gets to 80. This silly chicken is moving along with him. And as he looks a little bit closer, he realizes this chicken has 3 legs. So what in the world? So he hits it, floors it at 110, and he blows right through this crossroads. And the chicken makes a left turn. And he comes to a halt, he hits the ditches and spins out, comes to a breath, he goes, whew. Now what in the world did I just see? Can't believe this. So he makes his way back to the crossroads. He turns right to to follow and figure out what this chicken thing he thought he saw was. And he comes to a farmhouse. And sitting out on the front porch of the farmhouse is a man. He gets out of his car, he goes up, "Excuse me, sir, I don't, this might sound crazy, but have you seen a chicken run by here?" The man says, "Well, of course." "Well, a better question, have you seen one with 3 legs?" He goes, "Of course, let me show you." So he walks around to the back of the house, and in the backyard, there are hundreds of 3-legged chickens running around. Yeah, he says, I don't know. He goes, "Let me tell you. Living here in this house is just me, the missus, and the boy. We all love chicken, and we all especially love chicken legs. So we bred chickens to be grown with 3 legs, so we each get a leg." I said, "Well, that's a great idea." He said, "But them things are fast." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "How do they taste?" He goes, "Don't know, can't catch them." Well, that landed better than last week. And again, like last week, that has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about today. So we stand in this crossroads, the crossroads of looking at ourselves and looking at ourselves collectively. Going from the 10 commandments to the 2, ultimately 1 expression of God. And if you remember last week, if you could put the graphic of the 10, can you put the graphic of the 10 commandments? So this was the graphic we used last week, and the same one. So on the left side, you see the 4 commandments. We talked about them last week. And on the right side is the 6 we're going to talk about this week. And if we look at this, it's really separated really easy. It says God and man. So when Jesus comes along and he says, "Love God, love man," this is what's going to express when you do. You can see the synthesization of how this is happening. And again, last week we talked about this idea of God on the left side. And ultimately what that comes down to is one word of integrity. Because first we've got to identify and know within ourselves who or what is this concept of God. Not what somebody has told you. Not some picture that we have of whatever that picture is in books or paintings or whatever. What is God? And when you step into that, then we can become aware of what it is we are truly trying to love and express. I shared last week that my concept or my idea of God is agape love. A love, a God, an expression that continues to give and to give and to give and to forgive and to express and to give. No matter what I've done, no matter what I've said, no matter who I've hurt. This is energetic force saying, "Hey, dummy, I'm here. Open, receive, express, know." Without any judgment and without any condemnation. All that judgment and condemnation stuff is here. I can step through that and know God. So that's my concept of God. So your homework assignment from last week was to say, what is this God concept for me? Then the second homework assignment you had last week was to take a look at or identify what idols. The second one. What idols do I have in my life that I'm focusing on that take me away from or out of my understanding of what this God concept is? And when I take a look at that and I can move through those idols, I can move them out of the way, I can actually begin to worship the God of my being, express as the God of my being. Ultimately, we are then in integrity. Does that make sense? It's all about integrity. So today we're going to be looking at the right half, the man side or human side. And we're going to move through this. And what I'd like for you to do is consider as we move through them, when we look at these 6, is the idea of integrity. Think about that as we move through them. So the first one, honor your father and mother. Well, it's a no-brainer if you just take it in the literal sense. Honor your father and mother. Sounds like an easy one. But There's a lot of folks probably in this room and around the room that may not have had the loving, caring, giving expression of a father and a mother in the physical sense. So some people may have never had that, either one of them. So how do we understand and move through this idea of loving a father and a mother? Well, first it's about overcoming perceived faults that we see in them. We've got to get past that, because what we are seeing in somebody else is something that we're holding on to within. So if we can let that go and forgive, we now have the opportunity to honor. But at a more metaphysical, internal perspective, this idea of honoring the mother and father comes at us from a yin and a yang, the masculine and the feminine aspects of the Christ or the God within us, the totality of God. So as we talked about the integrity, when I step into this integrity idea and I begin to honor the fullness of who I am, I begin to have feelings of richness, integrity, and love. The second one, do not murder. Kind of a no-brainer again. Don't kill. On the outside aspect, it's simple. Don't kill. We see a lot of that in the news today too. And it's simple. Don't do it. But again, let's take that deeper within ourselves. You see, ultimately, when we are understanding God, when we remove the idols and we are living in integrity, ultimately, we can't kill. Because you can't kill somebody's character. They can allow you to, and we can take physical life. But I think this idea is deeper than just physicality. It is about the truth and the meaning of deep within ourselves, the character of who we are. But if we take it even deeper than that and flip it around, we have the opportunity to allow ourselves to kill ourselves. Don't do it. We allow these internal things, these aspects of hate or just disrespect of myself. And I begin to kill my own character. I begin to kill my own spirit. Because I create this crust that builds around the truth of who I am, and it begins to express. Do not kill. Hate and pain will do it. Let it go. The third one, do not commit adultery. Well, it is what it is, but this is more than cheating on a spouse. It's deeper than that. That means don't diminish a relationship, any relationship, in particular your relationship with God and your understanding of God. Don't commit adultery. Don't diminish the relationship. When we come back to the second basic unity principle, first basic unity principle says there's only one power and one presence, God the good, the omnipotent. The second principle says there is a spark of that divine within each of us. So ultimately, if I live out this second basic principle, unity principle, I won't be diminishing any relationships. I can't do it because I'm seeing the presence of God and the expression and the possibility within you and you within me. Back to integrity. Do not steal. Don't take nothing you ain't supposed to take. Pretty simple. It ultimately comes from the last one that we will talk about, the covetousness, because we see something somebody else has, and we want it, which if that desire builds up so deep within us, we're going to take it. And I'm not talking about just taking things, cars, pens, whatever. I'm talking about peace, joy. Don't try to take somebody else's peace and joy. There's a karmic reaction when we begin to try to take something that somebody else has or owns. ultimately, when you're in integrity, when you're expressing what you believe as God, in my case, agape love, when I'm doing that, when I'm living that out, not only will I not want what somebody else has, I will be happy and joyful that they have it. Does it make sense? Don't lie. This one is about bearing false witness. So don't talk about people. Don't tell stories about people. Lord knows when you turn on any news channel today or social media, that's all that seems it's there. People talking about this one or lying about that one or telling stories about that one. Oh, mercy. It's wearing. It makes you tired. Don't do it. But there's another thing too. If you're listening to what other people are saying in this process of people lying and coveting or expressing negativity about other people, if you're listening to it, you're participating in it. And if you're participating in it, you're guilty by association. We've got to move past that. But there's also don't lie to yourself. This is the deeper level. What are you saying to yourself about yourself? Are we looking at lack, limitation? I'm not good enough. All of those things, you are actually lying to yourself. Don't do it. Because it's false. It's not true. Do you believe that you were made in the image and likeness of God? Do you believe that? If you believe that, how could you possibly say that you're not good enough about anything? You can't. You're lying to yourself. You're bearing false witness to yourself. You are a beautiful creation and expression of a loving God. Know it and live it out. Stop lying to yourself. There is no lack. There is no limitation. You are good enough because you were made in the image and likeness of God. It's who you are. Don't lie. Then there's this last one. Actually, I want to step back to the do not lie, bearing false witness. Actually, what we want to do, when we step into the integrity, what we will do is bear true witness. Because we will be living out the truth of who we are. And we will be announcing to the world by the love and the compassion and things that we accomplish that I am a child of God. I am made in the image and likeness of God. I have more power through God within me expressing outward, and it will shine, it will shine, it will shine. Imagine each one of us doing that. Imagine the power that could come out of the, 40 or 50 people in this room this morning. If each of us stepped forth into this power to say, I have the power of God within me. I express compassion and love, and everything that I do, people will see it. Wow. That's powerful. Then we get to this do not covet business, the last one. We mentioned it earlier. It's really about wanting something that somebody else has that's not rightfully yours. But again, if we're in integrity, we're not going to desire something that we think we should own or have because we know we have everything that we need. So there's no sense in stepping into this desire thing. But we're talking about not only things, not only houses or cars or clothes or whatever it is, but something I mentioned last week. What about this idea of the good old days? I covet, I want, I desire the good old days. Remember how wonderful it was? Remember Unity of Fort Lauderdale 10 years ago? Remember the job that I had? Remember the relationship that I have? Oh, I want that so bad. Get over it. It's gone. But if we step into the flow, if we step into the truth of understanding and living out what we believe as God, that perspective, we step into this flow. We are no longer resisting the flow of God. And I no longer have to covet anything, because when I step into that flow, I'm living this life of hope, of peace, of love, of joy. This transformational Advent season begins to take birth as we move into the Christmas season within me. I am in the flow of God. I don't have to worry about nothing. God is living through me, and I allow it to. Again, we're going back to this integrity thing. It's who we are. Can we live it out? So the 10 Commandments are really about, on the physical expression at the superficial level, are really about training wheels. Live like this, do this, don't do that. You're going to have a good life. It's good, it's good. And then 1,000 years later, this character, Jesus, comes along. He says, man, you don't have to go through all that do and don't business. Stop it. Love God. Love people. He synthesizes it down to 2. Can you go back one slide? The scripture, which is ultimately what this series is based on, in Matthew, Jesus replies to somebody asking him about the greatest commandment. He says, the greatest, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2. He's saying, bottom line, quit trying to do and don't do, just love. In the Gospel of Mark, something very similar, Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Bottom line. Love. What does that mean? What is this love thing? It doesn't mean we don't hold people accountable. It doesn't mean we don't hold ourselves accountable. It doesn't mean people can get away with whatever they want to get away with, or I can get away with whatever I want to get away with. What it does mean is that when I love, I can express and hold people accountable with compassion, without beating them into the ground, because I recognize that within that person, this is hard in this political environment today, folks. This ain't easy. But when I can look and say, okay, beyond all of the crust and all of the crap, I know through my second basic unity principle, and what Jesus says to love God and love people, I can see the presence of God, because that person is made in the image and likeness of God as well. Tell me that ain't easy? Anybody think that that's easy? Yeah, good. Because it ain't. And then ultimately, when we get to this idea of loving God and loving people, we boil it down to only one thing, and it's the common word that says love. We hear Peter, we hear Paul writing about this in their letters, and in Revelation. Ultimately, what we see is one kingdom. There's a kingdom of love. We can step into that awareness of that metaphysical understanding that there's only one of us here. Tell me that ain't hard to believe. You look around the room, look like a bunch of folk in here. But ultimately, when we come into the expression and know love, and I'm talking about agape love, then we can know peace. That's where we step into, and I believe, the beginning of the experience of peace. There's many of us who have stepped into this consciousness, albeit for fleeting moments, recognizing the power and the awness of everything that is. Of course, it's fleeting, because when I open my eyes, go, ugh. Turn on CNN or Facebook, go, ugh. But the opportunity is there for us to step into peace. The opportunity is with us for this season, the 4-week Advent season, up until the birth of Christ, a new awareness, a new perspective, a new spiritual realization that, wow, there really is peace, and I don't have to let anybody knock me off of that awareness. They can try. Go ahead, try. Knock me down. I know love. I know peace. We're at a crossroads. What are we going to choose? What am I going to choose? What are you going to choose? Let's pray. All presence of love, Spirit of truth, light of the universe, presence of peace, we open our hearts and minds this morning to choose you within me. And so my prayer this morning is that not only I continue to be aware that I have this choice, I have the choice to say, I love. And when I step into that choice, I can begin to experience not only a new feeling and a new awareness, but a new world around me. And so my prayer is not only for myself to become further entrenched in this awareness, but for each person in this room. And so I ask each of you to join me to say, I choose peace. And so we claim it again in the name and the nature and through the power of the indwelling Christ within each of us and all people around the world, and so it is. Amen.